By the time Catherine Kowalski reached the morning room, her cheeks still burned where Lady Harrowby's ring had struck it, and she had already spent the only tear she meant to allow herself that day. The room smelled of cooling tea and violet powder, with a sharper note beneath, ink, sealing wax, and panic. Bills lay in little drifts across the escritoire, some folded, some torn open, all impossible. Lady Harrowby liked to sort them by ribbon colour when visitors called, as if debt might be made decorative by satin. "Catherine," her stepmother said without looking up, "you blotted column 4. "I corrected it, ma'am." "Then copy it again. Mr. Dunsmore notices everything." Mr. Dunsmore, the solicitor, did notice everything. He noticed the patched cuff on Catherine's sleeve and the old winter crack in the window frame, and the way Lady Harrowby's hand trembled just once each time she reached for her cup. He noticed, too, that Catherine had done the mathematics properly where Lady Harrowby had not. But men like Mr. Dunsmore preferred not to notice what made an elegant household indecently real. At 22, Catherine had become real only in useful ways. She copied ledgers in a fine, disciplined hand her father had taught her to steady. She mended lace by candlelight until her eyes blurred. She stood near the door while her stepmother entertained creditors she could not pay, and laughed as though insolvency were a difficult but amusing guest. If anyone addressed Catherine at all, it was with that thin social mercy that was almost cruelty. Plain girl, sensible girl, poor thing. Plain, as if it were an offence. Yet her face was fine-boned and serious, her dark hair stubbornly glossy no matter how little ribbon she owned, and her eyes, too large, Lady Harrowby always said, made strangers look twice before good manners told them to look away. Before breakfast, while the maid brushed crumbs from the carpet, Catherine had passed the pier glass and seen the print of the slap rising pink beside her mouth. She had touched it once, not in self-pity, but in inventory. Injury acknowledged, then set aside. Endurance was a craft like any other. She had been apprenticed to it since her father died 3 winters ago, and left behind a name, a house mortgaged to the weather, and a widow who learned quickly that kindness had no cash value. Her father had also left her Latin verbs, double-entry bookkeeping, and the troublesome conviction that dignity could survive even in borrowed gloves. "Numbers do not flatter," he used to say, guiding her child's hand down a margin. "That is why they are honest. Learn where honesty lives, Kit, and you may survive fashionable people." She survived them now by becoming indispensable and forgettable at once. The morning advanced in little humiliations. Lady Harrowby rejected one of Catherine's copies because the ink was too dark. A footman announced 2 callers and whispered the butcher's man waited at the back gate. Mr. Dunsmore requested the arrears list for the tenant farms, and Lady Harrowby demanded it before Catherine had totalled the spring losses. Every task was urgent. Nothing was solved. At 11 the front drive rattled with wheels heavier than a barouche. One of the younger maids, sent to the landing under pretence of dusting, flew back, wide-eyed. "A ducal crest," she breathed to no one in particular, "black and silver, 6 horses." Lady Harrowby went very still. The stillness was worse than shouting. "The Duke of Merrow does not call," she said. "He summons, unless he means to collect." She rose, all polish and powder and calculated sorrow. "Catherine, you are not to speak unless spoken to. Mr. Dunsmore, you will remain." Catherine bent her head, not to obey, to conceal the quickened beat in her throat. She had seen the Duke of Merrow only once before, at a distance at Almack's, where ladies named him cold as cut stone, and men called him exacting with the same wary respect they reserved for artillery. He held through a chain of legal instruments her father had once explained with a sigh several claims against neighbouring estates, including theirs. If he had come himself, matters were beyond embarrassment and entering ruin. From the hall came measured footsteps, then the butler's voice tightened by ceremony. The Duke entered the morning room with no flourish at all, only presence. He was tall, dark-coated, clean-lined, his expression unreadable in the way of men accustomed to being obeyed before they fully spoke. Rain glistened on his shoulders. He had not waited for weather to clear. His gaze passed over Lady Harrowby, paused on the ledgers, and stopped on Catherine only long enough to register she existed. "Lady Harrowby," he said. "Mr. Dunsmore." "Your Grace," Lady Harrowby cooed, with that delicate astonishment women deployed when they wanted a favour to seem like fate. "What an honour! Had I known—" "You did know I wrote twice?" A little silence fell. Catherine felt absurdly the ghost sting of the slap again. Merrow extended a gloved hand. "The accounts!" Lady Harrowby made a soft laugh. "Oh, these dreadful papers! My poor head for numbers!" "The accounts," he repeated, and this time he looked at Catherine. She stepped forward before she had fully decided to do so, and offered the nearest ledger. His fingers brushed the edge, precise, impersonal. He opened it, turned 3 pages, and said, "Who copied this hand?" Lady Harrowby answered at once. "My stepdaughter has a clerkly neatness. I keep her occupied." Merrow's eyes remained on the page. "Miss Kowalski, you will bring the remaining volumes to the library." Lady Harrowby's smile held by force. "Surely whatever concerns can be discussed." "Not surely." He closed the ledger. "Miss Kowalski." Catherine gathered the books, heavier than they looked, and followed him out. The library they used was her father's old room at the West End, now mostly stripped of warmth and repurposed for appearances. Merrow waited by the long table while she set the ledgers down in a careful stack. He removed his gloves. His hands were ink-stained at the thumb and forefinger. That, more than his title, startled her. He indicated the chair opposite him. "Sit," he commanded. She did not sit. He did not repeat himself. He only watched her for a moment, as if recalculating not her manners, but the room itself. Then he moved the chair back under the table and took his own seat. "As you choose," he said. He opened the first volume. Page by page, he reviewed columns, cross-references, signatures, rent tallies, interest dates. He did not waste words praising accuracy, but once, when she supplied a missing receipt number from memory, he glanced up with something like acknowledgement. "Your stepmother cannot perform this work," he said at last. "No, Your Grace." "She presents these books as evidence of good faith in settling her obligations." Catherine said nothing. The phrase "good faith" laid over these accounts would have embarrassed satire. Merrow folded his hands. "She owes sums she cannot meet. I can petition seizure before Michaelmas." The room seemed to contract around that sentence. Seizure of house, lands, furniture, everything not nailed down, and some things that were. She felt no shock, only the hard click of expectation fitting into place. He continued, voice level. "Lady Harrowby has proposed a partial settlement. She has offered, among other concessions, your marriage. Within the month." For one suspended instant, Catherine thought she had misheard. "To Mr. Septimus Vale, widower, 54, 2 sons at school." Merrow's tone did not change, which made it worse. "There are allegations of rough conduct in his first household, none legally actionable." Catherine's fingers found the table edge. Septimus Vale. She knew the name the way women know a dog's bark from the road before it bites. Too loud at assemblies, too familiar with servants. A laugh that enjoyed fear. Twice her age and then some. Offered as if she were an heirloom clock. "Did she tell you I consented?" Catherine asked. "She implied it." "I do not." Noted. He reached for a different packet, this one tied in black ribbon and sealed with his crest broken. There is another course, temporary, imperfect. She waited. I require a secretary in London to repair my estate correspondence and review tenant accounts before Parliament rises. You are competent. If you enter my household in that capacity, I can delay this marriage settlement through procedural challenge and demand document verification. Time creates options. She stared at him. Escape had visited her imagination before, but always as wildness. Running, hiding, starvation, dependence on charity. This was something else. Work, wages perhaps. A place acquired not by pity, but by skill. And in exchange, she asked, in exchange you work quietly, efficiently. You answer to my steward in practical matters, and to me on account decisions. If you fail, I dismiss you. If I dismiss you, Lady Harrowby proceeds as she pleases. A fair bargain by aristocratic standards was usually merely a cleaner form of coercion. Yet this one contained an opening she could touch with both hands. Why, she said, before prudence could stop her, why involve yourself beyond collection? Merrow considered her as if weighing what truth could be afforded. Because your figures are honest. Because dishonest ones cost me 2 tenant families last winter. Because I prefer competence to theatre. Outside, a carriage passed over wet gravel. Somewhere down the corridor a clock struck the quarter hour with insufferable calm. I would need permission to travel, Catherine said. Not if you are engaged as an employee and of legal age. I am 22. Then Lady Harrowby has no legal power to compel your residence. Social power, yes. Legal, no. Social power could still ruin, but ruin in London with a wage was a different map than ruin here with a husband waiting. He stood, signalling the interview's end. I leave for town tomorrow at 8. If you choose this post, be ready by 7:30 with whatever papers you require. 1 trunk. 1 trunk, she repeated. And Miss Kowalski, she looked up. If you come to work. I do not rescue people. The words should have stung. Instead, they steadied her. I did not ask to be rescued, Your Grace. For the first time, something like a grim approval touched his expression. Good. When she returned to the morning room, Lady Harrowby was alone, hands clasped too tightly over a fan she was not using. The smile she put on had edges. Well, she asked, what melodrama did His Grace perform? He offered me employment in London. I accepted. The fan snapped shut. You accepted. You do not accept anything without my instruction. I am of age. You are under my roof. For tonight? Colour rose up Lady Harrowby's neck, blotchy and dangerous. Do not be absurd. You are to marry Mr. Vale. The agreement is made. By you. By necessity. Lady Harrowby's voice sharpened. Do you think Cole appears by sentiment? Do you think your father's creditors vanished because you copied sums prettily? Mr. Vale will settle immediate obligations. You will do your duty to this family for once in your ungrateful life. Catherine might once have flinched at the word ungrateful. Now she only heard its familiar emptiness. My duty is not to be sold. Lady Harrowby stepped closer, perfume and fury. Mind yourself. Reputation is all a girl like you possesses, and yours is threadbare already. Go to London in a duke's household and see what they call you by week's end. Ambitious, predatory, fallen. Men take what is available, Catherine. Then they blame the availability. The cruelty struck because it was partly true. London could grind a woman down faster than country contempt. A paid position in a noble house would protect her and expose her at once. One accusation, one misplaced letter, one servant's gossip, and she would have neither respectability nor home to return to. Mr. Vale, monstrous as he was, at least offered society's legal shelter for purchased women. Lady Harrowby saw the hesitation and pressed harder. "Mister, Val has forgiven your plainness. He asks little. Obedience, discretion, gratitude. You could do worse." "I could die slower," Catherine thought. Aloud she said, "I leave at 7:30. Her stepmother's hand twitched as if to strike again, then fell. "If you walk out, do not expect to walk back in." Then we understand each other. That night Catherine packed one trunk exactly. 2 serviceable day dresses, 1 black bombazine too warm for the season, her father's Latin grammar, a ledger book of her own, mending tools, and the pair of kid gloves with the fingers let out twice. She wrapped her inkstand in stockings and tucked 3 goose quills into the spine of the atlas she could not take. At the last moment she opened the desk where her father once kept private notes and found nothing but dried sealing wax and dust, no hidden salvation, no dramatic inheritance, only the life already in motion. In the attic room beneath the eaves, rain tapped steady at the slates. She lay awake and counted risks like figures in a margin. If she stayed, marriage to Vale, likely brutality, no money, no legal recourse worth naming. If she went, scandal, dependence on a cold duke, possible dismissal, probable slander, work that could fail publicly. On one side, a certainty of diminishment. On the other, danger with variables. Near dawn she slept and dreamed of arithmetic. Columns marching, balances shifting, an answer just beyond the page. At 7 she went downstairs in her plainest dark dress and repaired pelisse, hair pinned severely, cheek bruise faded to yellow. No one from the household came to see her off but old Mrs. Finchett from the still-room, who pressed a parcel of currant bread into her hand and muttered, "Keep your own keys, miss." Wise woman. The Duke's carriage stood at the drive, black and silver under a thinning sky. A groom took her trunk without comment. Merrow was already inside, reading a sheaf of papers. He looked up as she entered, once assessing, punctual, properly dressed, unaccompanied. "You are on time," he said. "Yes, Your Grace." He handed her a folded document. "Terms of employment, salary quarterly, board included. You may resign with 14 days' notice. Read and sign if agreeable." Catherine took it, the paper crisp and real in her gloved hands. Wages, notice, terms, not kindness, structure. She signed. The carriage lurched forward. Harrowby House receded behind wet trees, its chimneys thin against the morning. Catherine did not wave. She sat very straight, document in her lap, while fear and relief braided into something sharper than either. She had not been rescued. She had been hired, for now that was enough to keep her name her own. The carriage wheels struck a rut, jolting ink-black trees into blur beyond the glass. Catherine steadied the signed paper on her lap with both hands, as if it might otherwise vanish. Merrow had returned to reading. His profile, reflected faintly in the window, was all angles and control. He made notes in the margin with a travelling pencil, each line short, decisive, no wasted motion, no attempt at conversation. Catherine read her own contract again. Salary paid quarterly. Position, temporary secretary, estate correspondence and account review. Residence, attic floor, Merrow House, London. Dismissal and resignation terms, both written plainly. No mention of protection, no mention of Lady Harrowby, of Septimus Vale, of scandal, of danger. Paper did not promise mercy, only terms. After an hour of silence, Merrow held out another folded sheet without looking up. "Read that." It was a list of names. Estate agents, stewards, factors, coal suppliers, legal clerks. Several marked with a cross. "Those with crosses," he said, "have submitted inconsistent figures in the last 18 months. Some from incompetence, some from theft. You will sort which?" Catherine looked up. With what authority? My authority through my steward. You will not accuse anyone directly. You will ask for clarification in writing and log every answer. She nodded. Yes, Your Grace. He set aside his papers then, finally giving her full attention. At Merrow House, servants take instruction from Mr. Pell, not from me. If they resist you, you inform Pell. If Pell resists you, you inform me once, not twice. It was a strange reassurance, almost a threat wrapped as policy. Catherine tucked it away. And Miss Kowalski, he added, voice flattening, do not mistake access for intimacy. We are not allies in a melodrama. We are employer and employee. The line landed cleanly. She appreciated him for saying it before she needed to learn it by humiliation. Understood. By the time London rose around them, brick, smoke, shouting boys, wet cobbles shining under a reluctant patch of sun, Catherine had learned the rhythm of the carriage and the rhythm of this man, forward movement, no ornament. Merrow House stood in a square lined with clipped trees and black railings. Its facade was pale stone, severe rather than grand. 2 footmen opened the carriage door. Neither looked surprised to see her. Both looked trained not to look at all. Inside, the hall smelled of beeswax and damp wool. Portraits watched from gilt frames with hereditary disapproval. A man in his 50s approached, thin and upright, hair iron grey, expression professionally neutral. Miss Kowalski, he said, with a bow shallow enough to preserve hierarchy but not insult. I am Pell. His Grace has informed me of your position. Your room has been prepared. Luncheon at 1. You are expected in the estate office at 2. Thank you, Mr. Pell. A maid carried Catherine's trunk upstairs to a narrow room beneath the roofline, exactly as promised. Bed, basin, pegs, a small desk near a window that overlooked chimneys. Better than Harrowby, not because it was comfortable, but because it was hers by stated right. She set her father's grammar on the desk and, after a moment's thought, placed her signed contract inside it. At 2, Pell escorted her to a back office on the ground floor where ledgers lined 2 walls and correspondence overflowed 3 large baskets marked North Midland South. 2 clerks looked up as she entered, one young and pink-eared, one older with ink on both cuffs. Mr. Bell, Mr. Sykes, Pell said, this is Miss Kowalski. She will oversee reconciliation of estate letters and accounts by His Grace's order. You will provide what she requests. Bell blinked. Sykes gave a tiny shrug that conveyed an entire essay on temporary female intrusions into male procedure. Catherine did not sit until Pell left. Then she removed her gloves, opened the north basket, and began. By 6, she had sorted 112 letters into 6 categories: rent delinquency, repair requests, legal disputes, grain transport, duplicate invoices, and nonsense. Nonsense was largest, mostly agents writing 3 pages to avoid admitting they had not done what they were paid to do. By 8, she had found the first clear theft. A coal supplier in Durham billed Merrow twice for the same delivery, invoice numbers altered by 1 digit, payment approved both times by an agent named Craddock. Bell called it a likely clerical confusion. Catherine set both papers side by side and pointed to the matching wagon tally marks, identical down to a torn corner and smudge pattern. Clerks do not tear paper in exactly the same shape by chance, she said. Bell flushed. Could be a duplicate sent in error. Then why is the second signed as received 3 weeks before the first? Sykes leaned in despite himself. His brows rose. At 9 she carried the file to the Duke's study, expecting to leave it with a footman. Merrow himself opened the door, jacket off, waistcoat unbuttoned at the throat, a map spread behind him with coloured pins bristling along county lines. He took the pages, scanned them, and said only, "How many similar?" "Unknown. I have completed one basket." "Continue." No praise, no scepticism, just continue. She did. 3 days established the household's opinion of her. Useful, inconvenient, temporary. Servants stopped lowering their voices when she passed, only when they realised she neither gossiped nor carried tales. Belle ceased sighing theatrically each time she requested documents after she corrected his arithmetic twice, without commentary. Sykes shifted from condescension to collaboration when she found where he had been misled by a falsified freight register, and did not mention the mistake outside the office. Merrow adapted with disconcerting speed. The first day he gave instructions in full paragraphs. By the fourth he sent brief notes, verify Kent arrears against tenant petitions, and expected answers by supper. She gave them. He began leaving his study door unlatched in the evening if he wanted reports before bed. Yet distance remained iron rigid. He addressed her as Miss Kowalski in private and public alike. At dinner, when she ate alone at a side table in the steward's parlour, he never summoned her upstairs. In meetings with solicitors, he had her stand behind and to the left, where she could pass papers but not be mistaken for a participant. It was not unkind. It was strategic. She understood and resented it in equal measure. London understood nothing and invented the rest. By the end of the first week, 2 cards had arrived for Miss Kowalski, companion to Lady Merrow. There was no Lady Merrow. Then 1 anonymous note in a large looping hand. Plain girls should not reach above station. They fall so heavily. Pell burned it without asking if she wished to keep it. On the 9th day, rain came hard, needling sideways through every crack in the city. Catherine had been sent with Belle to deliver urgent revisions to Merrow's Lincoln's Inn solicitor. Their hired carriage crawled through Fleet Street traffic, wheels grinding mud and horse dung into brown spray. Near Ludgate, they halted abruptly amid shouting. A journeyman porter lay in the road, perhaps 25, one leg bent wrong beneath him. A dray horse reared nearby while men cursed about blocked wheels. People looked. Nobody moved. "Driver!" Catherine said, already reaching for the door latch. "Stop fully!" Belle caught her sleeve. "Miss, you cannot!" She pulled free and stepped into freezing rain that soaked her pelisse in seconds. The porter's face was white under grime, lips trembling with shock more than sound. Catherine knelt in the muck, pressed her gloved hand to his shoulder, and spoke low. "Do not try to stand. Tell me your name." "Tom," he gasped. "Tom, look at me. Breathe with me. Good, again." She sent Belle, now splattered and scandalised, to fetch a surgeon from the nearest apothecary, while she flagged 2 dock labourers and directed them to lift carefully by board from a cart. Her skirts wicked up filthy water to the knee. By the time the surgeon arrived, Catherine's best pelisse was ruined and her gloves would never recover. When she returned to Merrow House, shivering and late, Pell met her in the hall with a blanket, and disapproval sharpened by anxiety. "His Grace is in the study," he said, "and not pleased." Merrow stood by the fire when she entered, rain-dark hair still precise somehow, as if weather obeyed him differently. "You delayed delivery by 90 minutes, he said. "Yes, Your Grace." "Why?" "A porter was struck. Broken leg, likely. No one else was assisting." A beat of silence. "You are not paid to direct street rescues." "No, Your Grace." "Yet you did." "Yes." His jaw tightened. And if Belle had been robbed while carrying legal drafts? If those papers had been taken? "I kept the satchel with me, dry." She held it out. "The revisions were delivered." He stared at her, then at the mud drying on her hem. You are drenched. Go change before you develop a fever. It was neither censure nor approval. Again that infuriating middle ground. At the door she paused. I have his name and master's shop. I should like to send payment for his treatment. Merrow's answer came too quickly, defensive almost. From your own wages, if you choose. I intended no other source. Do as you think proper. She left, with her pulse hammering, unsure whether she had won a point or lost one. The next morning a parcel waited on her desk. A second-hand dark blue pelisse, plain but well cut, dry-cleaned and mended at the cuff. No note. Pell, when asked, said only, Accounts Office Petty Cash did not purchase it. Bell swore he knew nothing. Sykes smirked into his ledger. Catherine wore it anyway. Complications arrived not in a storm, but folded neatly under wax seals. First came a solicitor's letter from the countryside, redirected from Harrowby House. Mr. Dunsmore informed her that Mr. Septimus Vale had set a date for formal contract signing and expected her return by the end of fortnight. As her natural guardian, Lady Harrowby considered her current employment temporary agitation and required immediate compliance. Catherine wrote back before breakfast, Sir, I am 22 years of age and under no legal guardianship. I decline all marital negotiation with Mr. Vale. Further correspondence on this subject may be directed to my employer's legal office for record. She showed the draft to Pell, who raised one eyebrow and said, Concise, keep a copy. She did. Second came gossip with teeth. Bell entered the office flushed and angry one afternoon, waving a newspaper column from a society sheet that pretended to satire while naming names by initials anyone could decode. An industrious young lady from the provinces, celebrated for her penmanship and strategic tears, has found a post near a certain ducal dispatch box. We hear debts melt when eyes are sufficiently soulful. Sykes muttered a curse. Bell said, Shall I have the porter toss every copy? No, Catherine said. Let them print. It saves them speaking. Her hands were steady as she filed the clipping. Later, alone at her desk, she stared at the words until they blurred, then returned to the Midland basket and found 2 forged grain receipts out of sheer spite. Third came sabotage. One evening, while reconciling tenant arrears against signed promissory notes, Catherine realised 3 key pages were missing from the March ledger, cut cleanly near the binding. Without them, she could not prove a chain of falsified charges she had been tracing for days. She checked every shelf twice, then called Sykes. Did you remove pages for copying? His expression hardened. Never from a bound ledger. Bell swore he had locked the office at dusk the day before. Pell confirmed only 4 people held keys. Himself, Bell, Sykes, and now Catherine. Merrow had a master key by default. By midnight, whispers had begun downstairs. Missing pages, new secretary, convenient. At breakfast, a footman delivered an unsigned note on cheap paper to her place in the steward's parlour. Forgery is easiest when originals disappear. Catherine burned that one herself. When she reported the missing pages to Merrow, he listened without interruption, then asked, Who benefits if your findings cannot be proved? Any agent falsifying charges. Also, Lady Harrowby, if she seeks to discredit my work. Can she reach this office? Not directly, but she can pay someone who can. He gave one sharp nod. From now on, all ledgers under review remain in my study overnight. You and I keep the keys. Pell audits access logs at noon and midnight. A pause, then quieter. Do you wish to resign? It was, she realised, an exit offered without humiliation. She almost laughed. No, Your Grace. Very well. The search for missing pages yielded nothing for 3 days. Then Catherine noticed Bell's blotting paper had mirrored impressions. faint backward numbers from a copied entry she recognised from one of the missing sheets. She did not accuse him. She asked whether anyone had borrowed his desk after hours. Bell swallowed and admitted a junior copyist from the legal office had worked there just one evening at the request of a clerk attached to Mr. Vale's solicitor. By supper, the junior copyist had disappeared, and by post at 10 came Lady Harrowby's letter, scented and vicious. "My dear ungrateful girl, do cease this theatrical defiance. You cannot imagine yourself a professional forever. Return at once, and we shall smooth over your unpleasant conduct. Mr. Vale is patient, but patience has limits. I should hate to see your little London experiment collapse under allegations of embezzlement. So many papers pass through such clumsy hands." Catherine read it twice, folded it very small, and put it in the file marked Harrowby. Her isolation sharpened into something almost clean. The midpoint came on a Tuesday evening with rain again, softer this time, misting the window panes in the West Library. Merrow had requested boundary maps for a tenancy dispute in Norfolk. Pell had sent Catherine upstairs to locate an older county atlas from the third shelf, west wall. The room was rarely used now. Dust lay on the upper bindings, and the fire had burned low to embers. She moved the ladder carefully along the shelf, scanning spines stamped in fading gold. Then she saw it. A broad leather atlas with a cracked corner she knew as one knows a childhood scar. Her father's old Blaeu volume, identifiable even with the Harrowby bookplate peeled away, because a drop of candle wax had hardened over the A years ago when he let her turn pages by herself. Why was it here? Sold with other books, likely, when debts required liquidation. She drew it down, pulse quickening with a grief she had no time to indulge. The atlas was heavier than memory. As she carried it to the table, something shifted inside, not the soft slide of loose maps, but a denser thud against the spine. She frowned, opened the front board, and shook gently. A sealed packet slipped from between map leaves and landed against her wrist. The paper was old, folded into oilcloth, tied with narrow twine. On the outer fold, in her father's hand, unmistakable even after years, were the words, K.K., to be opened in witness if needed. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The room narrowed to the packet, the old handwriting, the sound of rain. She broke the twine with clumsy fingers and unfolded layer after layer. Inside lay 3 documents: a codicil to her father's will, properly witnessed and dated 6 months before his death, a schedule of trust income due to my daughter Catherine Elżbieta Kowalski upon attainment of 21 years, and a private letter from her father to Mr. Dunsmore noting concern over Lady Harrowby's pressure to consolidate accounts. The codicil named independent trustees, not Lady Harrowby, and expressly forbade use of Catherine's trust principal for household debts. At the bottom, beneath his signature, was a later notation, received into household deed box, LH. Then, in a different ink, a scraped alteration over one trustee's name. Falsified, concealed, for years. Catherine sat very still, documents spread before her like evidence at a trial no one had thought she could demand. The room tilted, then righted. She saw suddenly the shape of everything, the urgency to marry her off before questions, the constant refrain of duty and expense, the panic whenever she touched old accounts, the eagerness to hand her to Vale as settlement. Not merely cruelty, fraud. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Merrow entered without announcement, coat damp from an evening ride, expression already set for business. "You found the..." He stopped when he saw her face. "What happened?" Catherine stood, papers in both hands, and heard her own voice come out flat with contained force. "This happened?" He read the first page once, then again more slowly. His eyes lifted, dark and suddenly very sharp. "Where did you get these?" "Inside the atlas from that shelf. My father hid them." Merrow moved to the firelight and examined signatures, seals, witness names. "Dunsmore's mark is genuine. So is your father's. The trustee alteration is not." He looked at her. "If authentic, and they appear to be, your stepmother concealed a trust and may have forged probate submissions." "May have." Catherine's laugh was brief and dangerous. "She has fed her debts with my portion for 3 years, then offered me as payment when it ran dry." "Yes." The single syllable held no comfort, only acknowledgement. He set the papers down carefully, as if they were explosive. "This goes to Chancery, immediately, quietly." "Quietly is how she survived," Catherine said. "Quietly is how girls disappear into arranged contracts while men discuss procedure." His mouth tightened. "Public accusation before filing gives her time to destroy records." "I know." She pressed her fingertips to the table until feeling returned. "Then we file tonight." "It cannot be tonight. Why not?" "Because courts are closed and affidavits require—" "I do not care if judges are asleep." Her voice rose, then steadied with effort. "I'm done waiting politely while she bargains my life." Something in him answered that. Not anger, exactly, but recognition. He looked away first toward the rain-streaked window. "When I was 30, he said abruptly, "I delayed action against my uncle's trustees for 6 weeks because I wanted proof beyond challenge. In those 6 weeks, the woman I intended to marry accepted another offer. She believed my silence meant indifference." A pause. "I told myself caution was virtue. It was fear." Catherine stared at him, startled by the nakedness of it. He continued, voice controlled again, but rougher at the edges. "I do not repeat mistakes. We file at opening tomorrow. Tonight we prepare every supporting paper and secure witness statements before anyone is warned." The room held the weight of decision. Catherine gathered the codicil, squared it with the ledger pages, and met his gaze directly. "Then stand beside me publicly when this breaks," she said. "Not over me, not instead of me, beside me." Merrow did not answer at once. Rain tapped the glass like fingers counting. Finally, "Yes." "Because if you mean to keep distance once scandal turns, say so now." "I will proceed without your name." His expression sharpened, almost offended. "I gave my word." "So did my stepmother." A flicker, anger then respect. "I am not Lady Harrowby." "No," Catherine said. "Prove it." She sat then, not because she was told, but because there was work to do, and the night was already shortening. She sat then, not because she was told, but because there was work to do, and the night was already shortening. Merrow rang once. When Pell appeared, he did not ask questions at the sight of parchment spread like battle plans over the library table. "Wake Mr. Hale from chambers," Merrow said. "Tell him I require affidavits drafted before dawn. Send a man for Mr. Dunsmore at once, and for Mrs. Finchett from Harrowby, if she can be located discreetly. No messages through common post. Trusted riders only." Pell inclined his head. "At once, Your Grace." By midnight the library had become an office of war. Hale, hair unpowdered and temper sour from sleep, drafted petitions at speed while Catherine supplied dates, account references, and names of clerks who had handled all altered ledgers. Merrow reviewed each line, cutting adjectives, tightening claims, turning outrage into admissible fact. At 1 a.m, Dunsmore arrived in a cloak, still wet at the hem, eyes ringed with fatigue and unease. When he saw the codicil, he sat down without invitation. "Good God," he said softly. "I thought this destroyed." "You witnessed it," Catherine said. "You told my father to lodge it with the deed box." Dunsmore removed his spectacles, cleaned them with a shaking hand, bought himself time. I did witness a codicil. I did advise secure retention. Lady Harrowby informed me after your father's death that the codicil had been revoked and superseded. By what instrument? Merrow asked. None that I saw. He looked from one to the other. Your Grace, if this is filed, she will contest ferociously. She has influential allies through Vale. Let her contest, Catherine said. Will you swear what you know? Dunsmore hesitated just long enough to be memorable. Then, yes, I will swear to execution and witness. Relief did not come, only momentum. Hale drafted his statement. Dunsmore signed. By 2 they had 3 affidavits and a petition prepared for filing at Chancery opening. Mrs. Finchett could not be found. The rider reported Harrowby had dismissed half the household servants in the last week. At 3:30 Merrow insisted on tea and 10 minutes' pause. Catherine stood by the window instead, palms braced on the sill. London sleeping under rain. If she learns before morning, Hale began. She already knows, Catherine said. Merrow looked over. Why? Because she always knew where danger began. Me with paper and time. Dawn came grey and thin. At 7 Hale left with sealed packets and explicit instructions. At 8:15 he returned early, face ashen. They would not file, he said. Merrow went still. On what ground? Counter-petition lodged at opening by Lady Harrowby's counsel. She alleges Miss Kowalski stole private family papers from her residence, forged additions, and conspired to extort settlement under ducal pressure. She seeks injunction restraining use of disputed documents pending inquiry. Catherine felt the floor tilt, then lock. Hale continued, voice clipped. Further, she has submitted 2 affidavits attesting to Miss Kowalski's clerical irregularities at Merrow House, anonymous but formatted through Vale's solicitor. They imply missing ledger pages, misappropriation risk. Bell, Sykes, Pell. Any one of them could be used to seed doubt. She had known this. Knowledge did not soften impact. Was the injunction granted? Merrow asked. Temporary restraint, yes, until preliminary hearing. The court clerk sealed our copy of the codicil as contested evidence and retained it in registry. Catherine turned sharply. Retained the original? Yes. A silence followed, dense and dangerous. The original in hostile custody, the filing blocked, and her name now tied to theft and forgery in official channels. If the story spread, and it would, her position at Merrow House became not a refuge but proof of supposed conspiracy. Every repaired account, every discovered invoice could be dismissed as manipulation. Merrow spoke first. We proceed on 2 tracks. Hale, appeal the breadth of the restraint by noon. I want a motion limiting publication of allegations. Hale gave a short laugh with no humour. Her side is already leaking to the papers. As if conjured, Pell appeared in the doorway with a folded broadsheet. He did not enter until Merrow nodded. From the morning editions, Your Grace. The item was small, tucked under parliamentary notices. Distressing domestic dispute in a respected provincial family. A young gentlewoman, lately installed in a ducal household, is said to have removed testamentary instruments and fabricated claims upon moneys long consumed by lawful obligations. Catherine read to the end, then set the paper down. Her fingers were cold. Lady Harrowby had escalated exactly where she was strongest. Reputation first, legality second. If she proved Catherine a forger, Catherine lost not only trust income, but employability, social standing, and any protection from Vale's pursuit. Merrow, tied to her defence, could be painted as seducer or co-conspirator, weakening his authority over precisely the estate reforms they had built together. every dishonest agent would celebrate. "They mean to bury this in process," Merrow said, "and bury you in scandal while they do." Catherine lifted her chin. "Then we dig faster." By afternoon, faster had failed. Merrow's motion to narrow the injunction was delayed because the presiding master was unexpectedly indisposed. Hale muttered that indisposition had likely been purchased. A second application for emergency witness examination was denied on scheduling grounds. Procedure became a wall with velvet on it. Worse came at 4, carried by a uniformed officer with polite manners and a warrant. Not for arrest, for interview. At Bow Street, regarding allegations of forged financial records and unlawful retention of papers belonging to Lady Harrowby. Pell read it twice. "They cannot compel attendance without charge." "No," Hale said, "but refusal will be reported as evasion." Catherine took the warrant. The script looked elegant enough to hang in a drawing room. "I will go," she said. Merrow's voice cut in. "With counsel." Bow Street smelled of ink, wet wool, and stale anxiety. The magistrate's clerk asked neat questions in a tone of bored suspicion. Had she removed documents from Harrowby House? Had she altered signatures in estate ledgers? What was the nature of her arrangement with the Duke of Merrow? Did she expect marriage as compensation? Hale objected twice, was overruled once, and warned thereafter to permit inquiry. Catherine answered every relevant question plainly, and refused the last with perfect courtesy. When they emerged, evening had fallen, and 2 pamphleteers outside were already shouting headlines they had no right to know. "Ducal secretary in forgery scandal." One boy squinted at her and called, "Is it true you trapped him?" with tears. Hale snapped at the driver to move. Back at Merrow House, the genuine loss arrived in quieter form. Pell met them in the hall, expression stripped bare enough to alarm. "Mr. Sykes has gone, miss. Left before noon. Took his personal books and did not collect wages." Catherine closed her eyes briefly. Sykes had known where every duplicate ledger lay, which clerks could be leaned on, which shipments hid extra payments. If Harrowby's people bought him, they bought weeks of her work with him. "Anything else?" Merrow asked. Pell swallowed. "A letter from the charitable school in Suffolk, Your Grace. They regret they must decline Miss Kowalski's provisional offer to assist with correspondence. Their board has concerns regarding ongoing allegations." Catherine took that blow almost harder than Bow Street. The school had been her small private contingency, work unconnected to Merrow or Harrowby, useful work, respectable work, a future she could stand in alone. Gone in one polite paragraph because rumour had reached faster than truth. She went upstairs to her narrow room before anyone could witness what her face might do. The room seemed smaller than the day she arrived. On the desk lay her father's grammar with the contract inside, still crisp, still legal, still insufficient. She sat on the bed and pressed both hands over her mouth until breath steadied. Doubt came then, not dramatic, but corrosive. What if Lady Harrowby was right about one thing, that London would consume her and spit out the bones labelled ambitious? What if every effort only armed her enemies better? She had dragged Merrow into mud that now splashed his house, his staff, his name. Had she mistaken usefulness for power? A knock sounded. She didn't answer. A longer pause, then Pell's voice through the door, unexpectedly gentle. "Miss, you have had no supper sent up. Shall I bring a tray?" "No, thank you." Another pause. "Mr. Bell requests to speak tomorrow, says he has remembered something." Remembered now when the ground was already sliding. She almost laughed again. When footsteps retreated, she opened her ledger book and wrote down everything lost that day. Court access, document control, Sykes, school post, public standing. Beneath that she wrote what remained: memory, copies, Dunsmore's affidavit, Merrow's word, uncertain but extant. She slept badly and dreamed of doors closing one by one in a corridor with no windows. Merrow did not sleep at all. After midnight he dismissed Pell, sent away untouched brandy, and stood alone in his study with the fire collapsed to red ash. On the desk lay 3 piles: legal strategy, estate reports, and a single folded page in Catherine's hand, listing discrepancies from the missing March ledger. Her script was exact, even when hurried. He had come to recognise her temper by the pressure of downstrokes. He hated that he recognised it. At 30, he had called his caution discipline. At 36, he had learned its true name too late. Eleanor Ashford, laughing, impatient Eleanor, had asked him once, in a conservatory smelling of damp roses, whether he meant to marry her or keep meaning to. He had said, "When matters are settled." She had waited 6 weeks, then accepted a baronet with fewer scruples and faster decisions. She died 2 years later in childbirth. He had attended the funeral and stood at the back like a man auditing losses. Since then, he had built a life on control, estates balanced, risks contained, affections quarantined. Command was cleaner than longing. Debt could be called in. Grief could not. Now Catherine sat under his roof because he had offered terms instead of rescue, and she had taken them with her spine straight and eyes steady. He told himself he admired competence. He did. But admiration had crossed some quiet line into fear, the old unmanageable kind. Not fear for himself, fear of repeating harm by hesitation, by misstep, by the arrogance of thinking he could shield her without silencing her. Tonight he had watched her return from Bow Street pale with contained fury, and something in his chest had gone tight enough to feel like illness. A soft knock. Hale entered without waiting for invitation, a liberty purchased by 20 years' service. "You look like hell," Hale said. "Report." Appeal delayed to tomorrow. Dunsmore remains cooperative but nervous. And before you ask, yes, Vale's people are leaning on everyone with a pen. Hale hesitated. "There's another matter. You can keep distance and probably ride this out reputationally. Say she exceeded instructions. Suspend her pending inquiry. Society will forgive you by August." Merrow's laugh was brief and cold. "And her?" Hale's silence answered. Merrow looked back to the window. Rain again, faint against glass. "When I failed once, I told myself timing was prudence. It was cowardice dressed for dinner." He turned. "I will not abandon her to buy convenience." Hale studied him. "That sounds perilously like devotion. It sounds like obligation." "Liar!" Merrow did not deny it. After a moment he said, quieter, "If I step wrong, she pays first." "Then ask what she wants, not what protects your conscience." When Hale had gone, Merrow remained at the desk and wrote a short note in his own hand. "Miss Kowalski, I cannot promise ease. I can promise this. I will not withdraw when cost appears. If you choose to continue, I remain beside you as agreed. McKeek." He folded it, sealed nothing, and sent it up with the dawn tray. By 9 the next morning, Crisis stopped knocking and kicked the door in. Belle arrived breathless, hatless, and near panic, clutching a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "I found these in Sykes's lower drawer after he bolted," he said. "Didn't understand yesterday. I do now." Inside were carbon copies of correspondence between Sykes and a clerk tied to Vale's solicitor, plus a list of payments coded by initials. 2 entries were unmistakable, LH and SV, next to one date, musicale, announcement, forced decision before hearing. Catherine and Merrow read in silence while Hale scanned over their shoulders. "Lady Danbury's musicale tomorrow night," Hale said. half the ton attending." A second letter arrived before anyone finished cursing, an engraved invitation addressed to the Duke of Merrow and Miss Kowalski, his secretary, requesting their presence at Lady Danbury's intimate evening of music and family felicity. At the bottom, in cramped ink, likely added by Harrowby's hand, "How happy we shall all be to celebrate reconciliation." Pell brought a third blow within the hour. A messenger from Harrowby's council delivered notice to several morning papers. Lady Harrowby intends to make a public statement regarding her stepdaughter's engagement and restoration to family protection at Lady Danbury's event. "Engagement," Catherine repeated. The word tasted like iron. "To Vale." "Likely," Hale said. "If she frames it publicly before witnesses, she creates social fact even without legal force. Refusal then looks like hysteria or seduction-induced rebellion." "And with forgery allegations already seeded," Merrow added, "she can portray marriage as merciful containment." "Not just containment, erasure." If Harrowby succeeded tomorrow, Catherine's claim could be recast as vindictive fantasy of a compromised woman. Trustees might hesitate. Witnesses might vanish. Even victory in court months later would come after reputational destruction, and perhaps physical danger in Vale's house, if he managed to corner her socially into acceptance. Catherine unfolded Merrow's dawn note, read it once, and placed it in her pocket. "What is our position legally by tomorrow night?" she asked Hale. "Fragile. Injunctions still active until preliminary hearing in 3 days. We can present evidence of collusion from Bell's packet, but not in court before then unless we secure emergency audience this afternoon." "Odds poor," Merrow's gaze held hers. "You need not attend," she answered at once. "I will attend." "It may be a trap." "It is a trap. If I do not appear, she announces for me. If I appear and stay silent, same result." Rain began again, fine and relentless. Hale exhaled. "Then if we go armed with every document admissible, every witness willing, and enough copies that fire won't finish the job." Bell, pale but resolved, said, "I'll testify properly." Pell added, "Mrs. Finchett has been found, miss. She came to the servants' entrance at dawn. Says she has something Lady Harrowby missed." For the first time in 2 days, hope flickered. Small, dangerous. "Bring her," Catherine said. As Pell turned away, a final messenger pushed through the hall with mud to his knees and handed Merrow a sealed order from Vale's solicitors. Merrow broke it, read, and his face went colder than Catherine had yet seen. "Vale has petitioned for immediate private arbitration," he said, voice flat. "He claims a binding pre-contract signed in your name 6 months ago. He seeks enforcement and damages against any party harbouring you." Catherine took the page. The signature at bottom looked enough like hers to fool a stranger. Not close enough to fool her. Lady Harrowby had forged again, and this time she had moved the piece that could cage Catherine fastest, a contract made to look voluntary. Outside, thunder rolled over the square. Inside, no one spoke for several seconds. Then Catherine lifted her eyes to Merrow. "We end this tomorrow," she said. Whether they could was another question entirely. "We end this tomorrow," she said. Merrow gave one short nod. "Then we don't go in blind." Pell returned with Mrs. Finchett, wrapped in a shawl too thin for the weather, and carrying a biscuit tin tied with string. She looked smaller than Catherine remembered, and twice as hard. "I've no liking for grand houses," Mrs. Finchett said, eyeing the study. "But I've even less for liars. Beg pardon, Your Grace." "None needed," Merrow said. "Show us what you brought." Mrs. Finchett set the tin on the desk. Inside were folded scraps, a narrow household memorandum book, and 2 sealing wafers stuck to one another like dead leaves. "I kept the rubbish from the morning-room grate when her ladyship burned papers last Tuesday," she said. "Habit from years of saving string and buttons. Saw names on some bits. Thought maybe useful." Catherine unfolded the scraps with care. Most were charred edges. One held half a line in Vale's solicitor's clerk hand she now recognised from Bell's packet, pre-contract to be dated prior Michaelmas. Another fragment carried Lady Harrowby's note. "Practice her hand less flourish on Kay," Hale swore under his breath. The memorandum book was worse. Lady Harrowby had used it as a blotter pad for correspondence. Mirror impressions showed repeated attempts at Catherine's signature, K. Kowalski, Catherine E. Kowalski, and once Catherine Elizabeth, corrected over itself. On the final intact page, a list. Danbury Musical announced gratitude plus engagement. Merrow cannot contradict in public. If gentleman, if girl refuses, equals hysteria from shame. Catherine read it twice, then closed the book very gently. "This is not proof enough alone," Hale said, already thinking in objections. "But with Bell's letters, Dunsmore's affidavit, and the signature inconsistencies—" "It is enough for tomorrow night," Catherine said. "Enough to stop her owning the first story." By late afternoon, they had copied every document in triplicate. Hale retained 1 packet. Merrow carried 1. Catherine kept 1 in a leather portfolio tucked beneath her cloak. Bell signed his statement with shaking fingers. Dunsmore agreed to attend Lady Danbury's under protest and indigestion. Mrs. Finchett refused to hide. "If she means to call me a liar, she can do it to my face," the older woman said. At 7:30, Catherine stood in her narrow room, fastening the plain blue pelisse at her throat. She had no jewels and wore none. She tucked Merrow's morning note into her glove, not for sentiment, for steadiness. A knock sounded. "Miss Kowalski!" Merrow's voice from beyond the door, formal even now. "Yes." When she opened, he was in evening black, expression composed and eyes that were not. He glanced once at the portfolio under her arm. "Ready?" "Yes." He held her gaze an extra beat. "You're not required to stand alone tonight." "I know," she said, "but I will stand first." Something like approval and something like pain crossed his face. "Good." Lady Danbury's drawing rooms blazed with chandeliers and bad intentions. Violins threaded through conversation. Perfume and candle wax and wet wool from arriving cloaks mingled in the overheated air. Half the ton seemed present, arranged in bright little constellations around gossip's centre. When Merrow and Catherine entered, the music did not stop, but conversation thinned, shifted, sharpened. Lady Danbury swept forward, feathers trembling. "Your Grace, Miss Kowalski! How very brave of you both!" Her smile twitched toward panic. "Such unfortunate reports. I do hope all may be explained quietly." "Quiet has had its turn," Catherine said pleasantly. Across the room Lady Harrowby stood in rose satin, diamonds at throat, one gloved hand resting on Septimus Vale's sleeve as if he were a prize mastiff. Vale's heavy face shone with confidence. He bowed to 3 different women while staring at Catherine as though appraising livestock. Lady Harrowby raised her voice before they had crossed half the carpet. "My dear child," she called, "at last! We feared distress had kept you away." Every head angled toward them. The quartet faltered and recovered. Catherine stopped at a deliberate distance, near enough to be heard, far enough not to be touched. Merrow halted at her left shoulder, not ahead. "I am not distressed, Lady Harrowby," Catherine said, "only occupied." "With what?" Lady Harrowby laughed, thin and musical. Inventing more papers! You have caused such anxiety. Mr. Vale has been kindness itself." Vale stepped forward, showing teeth. "Miss Kowalski, these misunderstandings are beneath you. Come, let us settle family matters at home." "I have no home with you," Catherine said. A murmur flickered. Lady Harrowby snapped open her fan. "Do not perform," she hissed, then turned the hiss into a smile for the room. "Friends, forgive a mother's indulgence. Catherine has always had a dramatic turn when overtired. The strain of London employment has unsettled her. Happily, she has agreed to repair matters. Mr. Vale and I are pleased to announce her grateful acceptance of his offer." There it was, clean, public, nearly irreversible if unchallenged. Catherine heard her own pulse once, twice, and stepped forward into the centre of the room. "No," she said, not loud. "Enough!" She set her portfolio on a side table, opened it, and withdrew the first packet. "I have accepted no offer from Mr. Vale. I have signed no pre-contract. The document circulated this morning is forged." Vale barked a laugh. "You expect society to take your word against mine?" "No, I expect them to read." She lifted the alleged pre-contract copy Hale had obtained that afternoon, then a page from Lady Harrowby's memorandum book. "Mr. Vale's contract bears my signature as Catherine Elsbeth Kowalski, missing an I. My middle name is Elzbieta. I have signed it correctly on every legal instrument since age 17, including my employment contract witnessed by Mr. Pell and His Grace's steward's office." She handed both pages to Lady Danbury. "Compare the capital K. In the contract it loops right, as Lady Harrowby's does in her correspondence. Mine cuts left. Also, this blotter book contains practice forms of my hand and Lady Harrowby's instruction. Practice her hand less flourish on K." Lady Danbury's face drained. "Augusta!" Lady Harrowby did not look at her. "A servant's scribble. Planted." Mrs. Finchett stepped out from behind a knot of footmen, as if summoned by spite itself. "My scribble keeps kitchens fed, your ladyship," she said, "and I pulled that book from your own morning-room drawer before you dismissed me." Gasps now, unmistakable. Vale's confidence flickered. Lady Harrowby recovered fast. "Even if this nonsense were true, it does not excuse theft. She stole testamentary papers from my house and altered estate ledgers under ducal influence." Catherine was ready. She produced Bell's statement and the copied letters between Sykes and Vale's clerk. "Mr. Sykes, former accounts clerk at Merrow House, received payments coded to LH and SV in exchange for removing ledger pages and supplying false allegations against me. Here are his letters arranging that exchange and the payment list in his hand." Vale lunged to snatch the paper. Merrow caught his wrist mid-air, not violently, immovably. "Do not," Merrow said. Vale jerked back, face darkening. "This is conspiracy." "Then sue me," Merrow said, "in open court." Catherine did not look at either man. She kept her eyes on Lady Harrowby. "As for testamentary papers," she said, "my father executed a codicil witnessed by Mr. Dunsmore granting me an independent trust at 21 and barring its use for household debt. That codicil was concealed. Mr. Dunsmore?" The solicitor, pale and damp, stepped forward from the back row where he had clearly hoped to remain decorative. "I witnessed such a codicil," he said, voice wavering only once, "and advised secure retention. I was later told, falsely, it had been revoked." Lady Harrowby's fan trembled. "You incompetent old coward!" "Perhaps," Dunsmore said, to everyone's astonishment, "but not perjured." The room was no longer merely listening, it was judging. Lady Harrowby tried one final pivot, eyes bright with fury. "Very well. Let us say there are accounting disputes. You are still my stepdaughter. You will come home with me now before you disgrace yourself further." command, naked and old as habit. Catherine felt suddenly and vividly the sting of that slap in the morning room, the years of standing by doors, the one tear spent and hidden. She stood straighter. "No," she said, "I am 22 years old. I'm not under your guardianship, legal or moral. I claim my trust, my majority, and my name. I will not return to your house." Lady Harrowby took one step forward, voice dropping to a whip crack only those nearest could hear. "Ungrateful little thing! I made you. You used me," Catherine said, just as low. "There is a difference." Then, aloud, for the room, "Any further statements regarding my engagement, my sanity, or my supposed theft will be answered in court tomorrow with sworn evidence." Vale looked from one face to another, and for the first time found no easy ally. "This is not done," he muttered. "It is now," Catherine said. The quartet had stopped entirely. In the silence, someone near the fireplace began to clap once, uncertainly, then stopped when no one joined. But the social weather had already turned. Women who had snubbed Catherine all month now avoided Lady Harrowby's eye. Two men stepped back from Vale, as if contagion travelled by cuff-link. Lady Danbury, voice tight, said, "I think perhaps we shall have no further announcements this evening." Lady Harrowby stood absolutely still, and Catherine heard it the tiny audible crack of a fan rib splitting under pressure in her hand. Lady Harrowby did not fold. She struck back before midnight. By the time Merrow's carriage reached home, a runner from Hale was waiting with news. Harrowby's counsel had filed emergency affidavits alleging coercion at the Musicale, claiming the Duke intimidated witnesses, and that Mrs. Finchett had been bribed. Vale added a declaration that Catherine had previously encouraged marital expectations in private letters no one had seen. "They're trying to taint every witness as compromised," Hale said when he arrived an hour later, rein on his cuffs. "Hearing moved to first call tomorrow. We'll get one clean chance." Morning in Chancery smelled of wet stone and old paper. The courtroom was crowded beyond comfort, with barristers in wigs, curious peers, and two reporters pretending not to take notes. Lady Harrowby sat rigid in dove grey, pearls flawless, eyes hot. Vale beside her looked sleep-starved and mean. Catherine took her place at council table with Hale. Merrow sat one row behind, visible, silent. The master began briskly. "We address contested codicil authenticity, alleged forgery of marital pre-contract, and applications for injunction and protective order. Proceed." Harrowby's barrister went first, elegant and poisonous. He painted Catherine as unstable, ambitious, manipulated by a powerful duke. He produced two servants from Harrowby House who swore they had seen Catherine rummaging deed cabinets years ago. He introduced Vale's claim of affectionate correspondence and waved sealed packets as if their contents were too private for open court. Hale rose to object. The master allowed conditional admission pending authentication. When Catherine was called, she stood with hands unclasped and voice clear. She answered every question directly, neither meek nor theatrical. Then Harrowby's barrister smiled thinly and shifted. "Miss Kowalski, is it not true you benefited from His Grace's unusual personal attention?" "I benefited from paid employment." "Did you not dine at his table?" "No." "Did you not receive clothing purchased at his expense?" "I received a replacement pelisse from an unknown source after mine was ruined assisting an injured porter while on office duty. I offered repayment. No one accepted it." A rustle through the room. "Generosity can imply intimacy," the barrister purred. "Only to people determined to misunderstand wages," Catherine said. A few muffled laughs. The master rapped for order but did not rebuke her. Then came the pivot Catherine had prepared for all night. May I examine the pre-contract signatures, side by side with 3 documents undeniably in my hand?" she asked. The master frowned. "You are not counsel." "No, sir. I am the alleged signatory." After a beat, he nodded. Catherine laid out the pre-contract, her employment contract, and a school donation receipt she had signed weeks ago. She pointed not to Flourish, but to Habit. "In my hand, the surname begins with a downstroke and broken loop because I learned copperplate from account books, not copybooks. In the pre-contract, the K is rounded with ornamental return stroke, Lady Harrowby's style, as seen in her memorandum book already submitted. Also, the pre-contract dates itself 6 months ago and references Vale's younger son as already at Winchester. His son entered Winchester 2 months ago, as confirmed by school register and posting notice." She handed up copies. Hale had obtained the register at dawn. Vale half rose. "Irrelevant." "Sit down, Mr. Vale," the master snapped. Catherine continued, calm as arithmetic. "Further, these letters, Mr. Vale claims I wrote, inviting his suit, are unsigned in full and address him as S.V. I have never addressed a gentleman by initials, but Lady Harrowby's household list abbreviates all male callers by initials in identical hand." Hale produced that list through Mrs. Finchett. The master's expression shifted from irritation to interest. Then Bell testified, sweating through his collar but steady. He identified Sykes's letters arranging payment for removed ledger pages. Dunsmore confirmed codicil execution under oath and admitted his earlier failure to challenge Harrowby's revocation claim. Mrs. Finchett, unshaken by barristers twice her rank, described retrieving burnt scraps and the memorandum book before dismissal. Harrowby's counsel attacked her memory. She replied, "My memory keeps 3 pantries, 6 servant birthdays, and your ladyship's tonic schedule for 11 years. It can carry 1 little notebook." Even the master's mouth twitched. Still Lady Harrowby fought. She requested leave to speak personally. Granted, she rose and delivered her last weapon, emotion sharpened into virtue. "I am a widow managing impossible burdens," she said, eyes bright. "I made hard choices to preserve family respectability. This girl has been susceptible to influence since childhood, romantic, contrary, unwell under pressure. If errors occurred, they were for her protection." Catherine listened, then asked permission to respond once. "Briefly," said the master. "My stepmother says she acted for protection," Catherine said. "Protection does not forge signatures. Protection does not sell a daughter to settle debts. Protection does not teach a girl she is furniture until she can be traded. No tremor, no tears. I ask the court for accounts, not pity." The master conferred with 2 clerks, reviewed notes, and ruled from the bench with clipped precision. Temporary injunction on codicil use, lifted for purposes of probate review, independent forensic comparison of signatures ordered. Preliminary findings already strongly indicative of fabrication in pre-contract. Control of disputed trust assets transferred pending full hearing to neutral trustees named in codicil. Lady Harrowby enjoined from representing Catherine as engaged, dependent, or under her authority. Mr. Vale's enforcement petition stayed and referred for investigation of fraudulent instrument submission. Vale went white. "I withdraw my petition." "Too late," said the master. Lady Harrowby did not collapse. She went very still, as she had the day Merrow arrived at her house, but stillness now read as fracture, not control. As officers moved to collect filed exhibits, she turned to Catherine, voice low and savage. "You think this makes you respectable?" Catherine met her eyes. "No, it makes me free." Outside Chancery, rain had finally stopped. The streets shone with puddles and carriage grease, and sudden pale sun breaking through cloud as if London had mislaid spring and found it again. Reporters surged, calling questions. Hale shepherded them toward Merrow's carriage. Pell blocked one persistent pamphleteer with astonishing grace. Bell disappeared as if shot from a cannon. Mrs. Finchett accepted a seat beside the driver and declared she would rather freeze than sit in a box with legal gentlemen. Inside, when the door shut, silence expanded. Catherine's hands began to shake only then. Not dainty tremors, deep, spent tremors from wrists to shoulders. She looked at them as if they belonged to someone else. Merrow reached forward, then stopped halfway. "May I?" She nodded once. He covered her hands with his, warm and steady, until the shaking eased. "You were extraordinary," he said quietly. "I was furious," she answered. "Those are not mutually exclusive." She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. "Did we actually win anything today?" "Yes, not everything. Enough that she cannot force you into Vale's house. Enough that your trust is out of her hands, pending final confirmation." "Pending," she echoed. "I am tired of pending." "So am I." At Merrow House the hall felt changed, not safer exactly, but honest in a new way. Servants who had watched the scandal unfold now looked at her directly. No pity, recognition. Pell took her cloak. "Miss, a note came from the Suffolk School Board while you were in court." He handed it over. Catherine opened it, braced for another polite refusal. "Miss Kowalski, in light of today's proceedings and on recommendation from Mr. Hale, the board renews its request that you advise on correspondence and account discipline for the Michaelmas term, should you still be willing. Respectfully, Mrs. Agnes Bertram." Chair Catherine let out a breath she had not known she held. "I am willing," she said. Pell's mouth twitched near a smile. "I thought so." That evening she went to the small desk in her attic room and wrote 2 cheques from her first full quarter salary and recovered retained fees. One to Tom Briggs's master for his surgical costs and convalescence wages. One to Tom directly for 6 weeks' board while he healed. She enclosed a note. You breathed when told. Keep doing that. When she finished, she sat very still in the thinning light. Victory, she discovered, did not feel triumphant. It felt like space opening where a wall had been. A knock sounded. Merrow stood at the threshold with no papers in hand. "Miss Kowalski, when convenient, I should like to call on you tomorrow afternoon. Properly. In your sitting room downstairs, if you permit." She stared at him, then almost smiled. "You require permission to cross your own hall, Your Grace." "For this, yes." "Then, yes, you may call." He inclined his head, as formal as any suitor and twice as uncertain. "Thank you." The next afternoon, Catherine received him in the small blue morning room at the back of the house, the one Pell said no one used because the light was poor afternoon. The light was excellent at 4, soft and clear across the tea tray she had insisted on pouring herself. Merrow remained standing until she gestured to a chair. He sat only when invited. For a moment they discussed harmless things. The school letter, Bell's temporary promotion, Hale's headache after victory. Then silence settled, expectant. Merrow set down his cup. "I asked to call because employer and employee no longer describes what has happened between us." Catherine kept her voice even. "What does describe it?" He looked at her directly. No command in it, no shelter of title. Respect first, then reliance, then fear. He gave a short, self-mocking breath. "Not fear of scandal, fear of wanting something I had no right to ask while you were under my roof and authority." She said nothing, letting him choose his words. "I have been careful to the point of cruelty before," he went on, "to others and to myself. Years ago I lost a woman because I delayed honest action, until it was convenient. I told myself hesitation was noble. It was cowardice. With you, I tried to keep distance for your protection and mine. Instead, I watched you face down an entire room and then a court. And I understood distance was simply another way of leaving you alone. His hands were clasped too tightly. She noticed because his composure was usually flawless. I don't wish to leave you alone, he said. Not in battle, not in peace, not in ordinary days when ink runs out and the roof leaks. Catherine's throat tightened unexpectedly at the word ordinary. You speak very well for a man who claims to dislike theatre, she said. I am not performing. I know. He drew a breath. I care for you entirely. I admire your mind. I trust your judgment more than my own in some matters, which is intolerable and true. I love you, Catherine. No one had said her name like that in years, without diminishment, without claim, simply as fact. She set her cup down carefully. I have wanted you to say that, she admitted, and I have dreaded it. Because of power. Yes, because gratitude can masquerade as love, and dependence can masquerade as choice. His answer came at once. Then remove dependence. He reached into his coat and placed a folded paper on the table between them. Your contract release, signed by me and countersigned by Pell. Effective immediately, with full wages through quarter end, and a reference attesting to your work. If you never wish to see me again, you leave with no debt and no stain from my house. Catherine looked at the paper, then at him. That is either the noblest thing you have done, she said softly, or the most terrifying. Both, possibly. She laughed, brief, real, then sobered. I will not leave to prove I can. I have already proved it. A pulse moved in his jaw. Then allow me to ask what I would have asked months ago if I had been a braver man. He stood, not kneeling, not dramatizing, just standing before her, utterly present. Will you marry me? Not you will, not bargain, not command. Catherine held his gaze a long moment and felt the old life sliding finally, fully behind her. The morning room slap, the sold future, the years of silence mistaken for obedience. Yes, she said, I will marry you. His eyes closed once briefly, as if absorbing impact. When he opened them, he smiled. Not the hard, rare curve she had seen in Victory's, but something young enough to startle her. May I kiss you? Yes. He did, gently at first, then with a hunger held in check by reverence. When they parted, both were laughing a little at nothing. Practicality returned because it was theirs. We proceed slowly in public, Catherine said. No triumphal announcements. Agreed. I keep my own work. Insisted upon. I take the Southwark Post. I expected no less. And if ever you order me to sit again... He actually looked alarmed. I learned that lesson. She pointed to the sofa beside her. Good. Then you may ask. He swallowed a smile. Catherine, would you sit with me? She moved over, making room. Yes. And sat beside him because she wished to. On a bright morning, 6 weeks later, Catherine stood in a modest parlour in Bloomsbury, while a carpenter measured shelves against the wall. Higher, she told him. The school ledgers are elephantine. The carpenter grinned. Yes, Mrs. Merrow. She still turned at that name, surprised each time. Their wedding had been small. Hale, Pell, Mrs. Finchett, Bell red-eyed in a borrowed coat, and Tom Briggs on crutches at the back, insisting he could stand for the vows. No orchestra, no spectacle, no Lady Harrowby. Now this house was hers by trust, income and her own wages both. 2 streets from the Southwark School office, where she spent mornings untangling donor correspondence and teaching 2 teenage clerks that accuracy was not optional. In the afternoons, she reviewed Merrow estate reforms for pay under a separate contract Hale had drafted with absurd pleasure. At noon, she crossed to the school. The office smelled of chalk and damp wool and optimism, underfunded by 3 counties. Mrs. Agnes Bertram, practical and brisk, handed over a stack of letters. "Parents from Deptford requesting fee remissions," she said, "and a donor who wishes his name on everything, including the slates." "Then he may donate slates," Catherine said. Tom Briggs worked at the next desk, leg heeling stiffly. He had a talent for columns and a tendency to apologise for existing. Catherine was curing him of the latter by assigning real responsibility and refusing gratitude speeches. By 3, Merrow's carriage arrived, not to collect her, but to deliver 2 bound volumes of corrected tenant contracts and a note in his hand. "Pell says you skipped luncheon. This is a hostile act. M." She wrote back on the margin. "Pell tattles. Send sandwiches, not threats. They arrived 20 minutes later. That same week, news travelled, properly sourced this time. Chancery's final confirmation restored Catherine's trust under independent trustees and ordered accounting of misapplied income. Lady Harrowby retained her title and some property, but lost control of Catherine's portion and, more painfully, invitations. Doors did not slam in her face. They simply ceased opening. Septimus Vale, facing inquiry into fraudulent filings and whispers about his first household now spoken aloud, withdrew to Bath for health and did not return that season. Sykes was found, compelled to testify, and discovered that paid betrayal purchased poor lodging and no friends. One rainy evening, Mrs. Finchett visited Bloomsbury carrying seed cake and opinions. "Your shelves are crooked," she informed the carpenter. "And you," she said to Catherine, "look fed." "Good." Merrow came in later, damp at the shoulders, removed his gloves and accepted tea while Mrs. Finchett interrogated him on coal quality. He answered respectfully. Catherine watched the 3 of them in lamplight and felt an unfamiliar, sturdy happiness. Not rescue, not ecstasy, simply life arranged by choice. After supper, when the house quieted and rain tapped the panes, she and Merrow went into the little morning room at the back, the one with clear late light in fair weather and silver shadows in storm. On the table lay school accounts, estate petitions, and her father's grammar, worn at the spine. Merrow paused by the chair opposite hers, then looked at her with deliberate softness. "Will you sit with me?" he asked. Catherine smiled, moved to the seat beside him, and sat. Outside, the city went on shouting and bargaining and surviving. Inside, she opened the ledger, dipped her pen, and wrote her name in a steady hand no one would ever forge again.